Welcome to another episode of the Smiles Ahead podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the popular question of dental x-rays and the scary word radiation. Do we need these x-rays? How much radiation are we getting? What do we need to do for safety? What do these x-rays even say? Do we need them every single time? All these questions that come up a lot. So we thought we would debunk some of the myths because there are a lot of old antigens out there that talk about certain things that aren't true this day and age, but have progressed in the culture of thinking about x-rays that way. So as always, in the first minute here, I'll give some quick answers. And then if you want to hear a little bit of the details, you can hang around for the next, 8 to 10 minutes or so, and we'll dive into that. But the main thing you need to know with dental x-rays is it is very, very, very low exposure now that we have digital. So beforehand, when we had, when you were taking traditional x-rays and you were processing them through chemicals and it was actually, having to use more radiation, they still weren't that dangerous. They were still needed to diagnose and they still were not giving you much radiation. But now we have 80% less radiation with digital x-rays. So what we always say is you get more radiation flying in an airplane than you do for a dental x-ray. So if you've flown this year or a couple of times this year, and then you go to the dental office and you won't get an x-ray, it's probably not going to align there. Make sure that you understand that just walking around in the world gives you a certain amount of radiation that's much higher than a dental x-ray. And that radiation comes from anything from, traffic and stoplights to sun to, a lot of different things that you're just going to get exposed to walking around throughout the world. So long story short, make sure you listen to your dental provider. If they recommend an x-ray, then go ahead and take it because they're doing it for a reason. We have a thing called ALARA principle, which is low as reasonably achievable. So the doctors are always going to practice that. And essentially what that is we need to see something under the hood. It could be a big issue if that we don't. And it could cause much more harm if we forego that and don't address that than any part of it getting a dental x-ray would be. So listen to your provider, talk to your dentist, talk to your orthodontist, and make sure you're staying on top of your x-rays. So don't deny it. You can always ask and be like, hey, do I really need this? Or, hey, what is this for? It's always good to get educated. Make sure you're getting all the information you need to be comfortable. And you can ask them these facts too. So like, how much radiation am I getting? How much safety goes into this? I've already had a couple x-rays at another dental office. Do I need this one? Can you share? That type of thing. So do ask questions, but know that if you give them all the information, they're going to use that very wisely and not expose you any more than you would need to make that diagnosis. So now we'll get into a little bit of the details here. Essentially what we measure the radiation in this type of x-ray is millisieverts. And when you get a dental x-ray, on average, you're getting exposed to 0.005, 2 zeros, 5 millisieverts. When you're walking around just being a human on Earth throughout the whole year, you're going to get up to 6.2 millisieverts. So that's a whole 6.2. The dental x-ray is 0.003. So it's very, very insignificant in that whole gamut of the year. So say you went through orthodontics and you went to get your teeth cleaning and you had to have x-rays at both. So say you had up to 3 or 4 x-rays in a year. That's still not even getting close to some of the stuff that you would have in your normal life, like walking around and getting sun exposure or flying in an airplane a couple of times. These are just small things that add up. So when you look at the average dose, the dental x-rays, even if you have to get a couple more in a year, is not going to do much. So that's another thing that people like to talk about, especially when they come to the orthodontic office. They're like, hey, we just got x-rays that our general dentist. There's no need for that. Let's do it without that. Okay. Well, here's the issue. We do different type of imaging. What they're looking at is a little bit more in specific areas in between the teeth. So we call them bite wings. Essentially what that does is shows that there's any interproximal caries. Caries is just fancy word for cavities. And it gives them the diagnostic tools to fill anything or watch any potential areas that could go wrong. If you don't get those and you're just looking at the outside of the teeth, they could look very healthy on the outside. And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and boom, you have a cavity all the way down to your nerve. You're going to need a root canal. You're going to need a crown. It's going to cause you a lot more damage and a lot more harm to not see that early. So highly recommend anytime the dentist, usually it's about once a year where they need to see in between your teeth and update that. Just make sure everything's healthy. Best case scenario, they say, hey, you're all good. Some people say, yeah, they say that every year and they keep taking them. Well, very, very well worth it because all it takes is one to really cause harm. So always stay on top of those. Then you come to the orthodontist and we do what's called a Panorex x-ray. Panorex radiograph is essentially a big overall view of what's going on under the hood, in your mouth, with your jaws, and it gives us an idea of, hey, there's enough bone to move these teeth. Hey, we have all the teeth, or we're missing this teeth, or we have extra teeth. Don't move this tooth because it might move into this root that could cause multiple problems. If a canine comes in and we're just pull it in blindly without seeing what's the other roots are doing, we could pull in one tooth and take the roots off of two other teeth and cause much more harm than good. So we need to see under the hood, and we need to see that x-ray. We need to see that bone. We need to see that jaw structure. And so people say, well, is that a lot of x-rays? I just got two here. I got two at my dental office. Again, it's not going to be every year. You're not going to get a Panorex every year. Usually those are every 2 years, bite wings every year. So even if it's 2 or 3 dental x-rays a year, you're still staying well under the rate of what's reasonable. And so, we look at it, and it would, to get you to a dangerous level, you would almost have to be exposed to a digital x-ray for hours at a time. And if you've ever noticed at the dentist, it's boop, just a click of a button and it's over. So the ionizing radiation that's out there is very limited. It's not going to, get into your bloodstream. People think, well, it's all adding up in here. And it's just simply not true. So that used to be, when they started x-rays way back in the early 1900s, you got to remember they were not having shields. They didn't have any protection. These were much higher rates of ionized radiation coming out because they just didn't know how to control it. They didn't know, and then as it got better, even the film x-rays were very, very low in radiation. And now that we're digital, again, we're 80% lower. So that's a big thing to take away. And some people say 80 to 93% is the actual story, but 80% lower. So there's been a lot of research, a few that I've noted here out of Yale, out of the Canadian Dental Association up there. So a lot of them have done long-term studies on this and no correlation to any type of brain cancer or any type of other cancer, mouth cancer. A lot of people get worried because that x-ray, oh, got so close to my head. Is it going to give me more chance of maybe getting jaw cancer, mouth cancer, or brain cancer? And the answer is simply no. The dosage is just too low. So the other thing that we like to look at is the problems that can arise if we don't do them. So I just touched on those a few before, but if we don't do the x-rays and we don't see under there, it can cause a lot more harm than the small dose of radiation that you're going to get when you do it. Also, with the digital x-rays, there's a couple of other advantages. Because it doesn't have to be processed through chemicals and films, we get that right away. So it helps with patient education. It helps with doctor to doctor. So with orthodontists, we're always working with some type of general practitioner or periodontist or oral surgeon, and we can immediately share those all throughout your chart. And so we can really keep that exposure low. So if you've been somewhere else, again, mention, hey, I just was at the oral surgeon, and we might say, oh yeah, we got a Panorex here, we got a 3D x-ray here, we can see everything that we need. No need for another one. It might be, hey, we went to the general dentist and we got the pictures between our teeth. Okay, that's great. glad you have a good bill of health here. Let's get this other small, simple x-ray, and then now we can have a full diagnosis. And again, no problem with having multiple. In terms of other advantages, you're looking at cost effectiveness. With digital x-rays, if we have to do them a couple more times, you're not doing this big process of getting them exposed. You're not waiting for it. You're not, losing this. And then, you could have one, and then, not to say that a doctor office would lose them, but records aren't saved if they're hard copies, sometimes over 7 years. So you might not be able to have access to those and all that good stuff. Another big question that comes up is for children. So growing children or children that might have other health problems. They're saying, hey, we've done a lot of x-rays at the doctor's office, CT scans, all this thing. We really need to stay away from these dental x-rays. Not the way to go. Again, we're talking about very minimal exposure and very high risk if we don't look under there. So say that we have, a tooth that's coming in sideways and we just don't take the dental x-ray, and that's not going to give us much exposure. We can't see that tooth. It could come in and burn off the root of a couple of other teeth. Now we're missing 2 other teeth. Then we try to pull that tooth in. It won't come in because we waited too long. We didn't know where it was. And it can end up causing dental problems, occlusal problems, and overall health problems. If we see something like a tooth that's coming in and hitting another tooth and causing issues there, it can cause infections, which infections obviously can lead to other big things. So long story short, digital x-rays over traditional x-rays, which were still pretty safe, are 80 to 93% less radiation. So don't forego your dental x-rays if your provider tells you to. There's a lot of myths out there, and we get it. Radiation, a scary thing. Radiation, cancer, exposure, all these things. And we also practice a ton of safety. Even though that it's very, very low, we still practice, all the safety. We even wear pins as providers, these little tags that show us how much radiation we're getting. Because remember, we're taking, 30, 40 a day sometimes, and it's still extremely low on our end. So listen to your provider, talk to them, ask questions. If we can help at all, we always try to explain. I think patient education is always huge. So don't feel uncomfortable. Always ask, and then ask, maybe why we're getting it, how much exposure we're getting. Is this completely necessary? If they say yes, my recommendation is go with the provider's expertise on that. If you feel uncomfortable with it, certainly go get a second opinion. And if you keep hearing the same thing, like, hey, we need this to treat, then go ahead and do it. But yeah, that kind of wraps it up. It just, we get a lot of questions on it. So hopefully that helps a little bit, and we can make sure we get everything we need for those diagnoses. All right. We will see you next week for another episode of the Smiles Ahead podcast, powered by Burrow Welchel and Culp Orthodontics. Thanks for listening to the Smiles Ahead podcast, powered by Burrow Welchel and Culp Orthodontics. Be sure to leave a rating, hit that subscribe button, and if you have more questions, you can reach out to me directly at sam@bwcortho.com. That's sam@bwcortho.com. You can also visit our website, bwcortho.com, and we will be happy to answer any questions you might have.